If you scream, the men outside this door will end your life. But if you keep looking at me like that, Zuri, I might lose my mind and end mine first." The whisper cut through the pitch-black darkness of the museum vault, heavy with the scent of rain, metallic copper, and the faint, sweet trace of vanilla perfume. Ji-Hwan Kong pressed his palm against the reinforced steel wall right beside Zuri's ear, his massive chest rising and falling in uneven, ragged breaths. His expensive charcoal suit jacket was torn at the shoulder, and a slow, warm trickle of blood was seeping through his white silk shirt, staining the front of her emerald green dress. Outside the vault doors, the heavy, synchronized thud of combat boots echoed against the marble floors, accompanied by the cold, unmistakable racking of automatic weapons. The Josie and Pa syndicate had broken their own cardinal rule. They had brought a blood war into a house of culture, and Ji-Hwan, the undisputed shadow prince of the family, was currently trapped in a 4x4 cage with the only woman he was forbidden to touch. Zuri didn't scream. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her eyes remained locked onto the sharp, shadowed angles of Ji-Hwan's face. She could feel the intense, radiating heat of his body, an overwhelming contrast to the icy, climate-controlled air of the archival room. Her fingers, stained with the gentle chemicals of her restoration tools, hovered just an inch away from his bleeding arm, trembling but refusing to drop. "You brought this to my doors," Zuri whispered back, her voice tight, a perfect mixture of defiance and terror. "You told me your family corporate foundation was just an art registry. You lied to me, Mr. Kong." Ji-Hwan's jaw clenched so hard a small muscle leaned out beneath his pale skin. He looked down at her, his dark, unreadable eyes tracking the way the dim emergency light caught the rich, deep warmth of her complexion, the fierce curve of her lips, and the absolute lack of submission in her posture. Every single person in Seoul bowed to him. Every lieutenant in his father's empire feared his silence. Yet this independent American archivist, cornered in the dark while a hit squad hunted them, was demanding an apology. It shook him. It pulled at a cord deep inside his chest that he had spent 32 years burying under layers of ruthless apathy. "I didn't lie," Ji-Hwan rasped, his voice dropping an octave as his eyes lingered on her lips before snapping back to her gaze. "I omitted the details to keep you breathing. If I knew they would track the ledger to this specific Josian-era screen, I would have burned the painting before letting your hands touch it. The ledger is inside the canvas, isn't it?" Zuri asked, her breath hitching as his body shifted slightly closer, his uninjured hand moving down to grip the edge of the restoration table behind her, completely pinning her between his frame and the wood. "The millions of dollars in illegal weapon shipments across the Pacific. That's what your rivals are looking for. That's what you came to take back." Ji-Hwan didn't answer immediately. The silence between them grew heavy, suffocating, and dripping with an attraction that felt entirely like a death sentence. He was mere inches from her, close enough to feel the frantic pace of her pulse against his own knuckles. He had never been this close to her without a mahogany desk or a crowd of bodyguards between them. For months, he had watched her from the glass balcony of his high-rise office, pretending he was just monitoring an expensive contractor. He had memorized the way she tied her hair up when she was frustrated with a delicate tear in a canvas, the way she drank her coffee black at 3 in the morning, and the elegant, fluid way she moved through his cold, sterile world. He had convinced himself it was just vigilance. Now, with the scent of her filling his lungs while his blood dripped onto her dress, he knew he was a liar. He was losing control, and it terrified him. "You shouldn't have looked," Ji-Hwan murmured, his gloved thumb brushing the very edge of her jawline, barely grazing her skin, yet the contact sent a visible shiver through her. "You should have just cleaned the paint, taken your check, and flown back to New York. Why didn't you leave when the first warning came?" "Because I don't run from intimidation," Zuri said, tilting her chin up, forcing him to meet the absolute certainty in her eyes. "And I don't leave my work unfinished, even if the man who hired me turns out to be a monster." "You're a man with a gun pointed at the door, and your blood on my hands," she whispered, her gaze dropping to his wounded arm. "Hold still. Your bandage is slipping." Before he could protest, Her warm hands made direct contact with his forearm, pulling the torn fabric away to inspect the gash. Ji-hwan stiffened completely, a sharp intake of breath escaping his lips. Her touch wasn't painful. It was steady, precise, and entirely devoid of the fear he was accustomed to. He looked down at her hands against his skin, the profound visual contrast striking him with a wave of raw, forbidden desire. In his world, hands only touched to take, to hurt, or to sign away lives. Zuri's hands were fixing him. "They're bypassing the electronic lock," Ji-hwan said, his tone suddenly flat, masking the sudden spike of adrenaline that had nothing to do with the gunman outside. "We have less than 2 minutes before the secondary seals blow. Then we fight," Zuri said, looking up from his arm, her eyes burning. "No," Ji-hwan corrected, his grip tightening on the table, his face leaning in so close his breath warmed her cheek. "I fight. You stay behind me. If a single bullet touches you tonight, Zuri, I will burn this city to the ground with everyone in it. Do you understand me?" The raw intensity in his voice left her speechless. It wasn't the corporate heir speaking anymore. It was the Mafia Boss claiming a boundary that he had no legal or moral right to claim. The door handle gave a violent, mechanical screech. The electronic keypad outside beeped in a rapid, failing rhythm. The separation between their worlds was dissolving in a spray of sparks. "We are so incredibly grateful to have you here with us tonight, sharing in this journey." Before the shadows completely close in on Ji-hwan and Zuri, take a brief moment to let us know down in the comments where you are watching this story from. Your presence truly means the world to our community. The vault door blew inward with a deafening metallic roar, the concussion wave rattling the heavy oak restoration tables and sending fragments of drywall flying through the air like a winter storm. Ji-hwan moved with a terrifying, fluid precision that completely contradicted his large frame, throwing his uninjured shoulder into Zuri's torso to shield her against the concrete pillar behind them. He fired 3 suppressed shots into the cloud of dust before the first intruder could even level his barrel. A heavy body hit the floor with a dull, wet thud. "Stay down," Ji-hwan ordered, his voice no longer a whisper but a cold, absolute command that brooked no argument. He didn't look back at her, but his left hand remained reached out slightly backward, his fingers hovering just in front of her dress, instinctively forming a barrier between her and the open room. Zuri pressed her back against the cold concrete, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Through the haze of smoke, she watched him. Ji-hwan was an absolute paradox, a man who appreciated the fragile, centuries-old beauty of traditional Korean art, yet navigated the brutal mechanics of death without blinking an eye. He moved through the chaotic crossfire like a phantom, his movements calculated, cold, and devastatingly efficient. 2 more shots echoed through the vault, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps and frantic shouting in Korean from the hallway. "The main corridor is clear, but the building is surrounded," Ji-hwan said, turning back to her. The stoic, icy mass had returned to his face, but his eyes were wide, dilated, and scanning her up and down with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Are you hurt? Look at me. Did the glass hit you?" "I'm fine," Zuri said, her voice shaking slightly as she stepped out from behind the pillar, her boots crunching on the debris. She looked at the floor, then quickly averted her eyes from the crimson stains spreading across the marble. "Where do we go?" "Your family's security forces." "My family's security forces are the ones who leaked the vault codes," Ji-hwan interrupted, his voice dropping into a deadly, quiet register. He walked over to her, his hand reaching out as if to grab her wrist, but he stopped himself an inch short, his fingers curling into a tight fist before dropping to his side. "The Joseonpa is divided. My cousin wants the ledger to secure a deal with the Taiwanese triad. My father wants it buried. And right now, you're the only civilian who knows it exists." "I don't care about your family's politics, Ji-hwan," Zuri said, using his first name for the first time, the words slipping past her lips with a weight that made him visibly stiffen. "I care about surviving the night." "Then you come with me," he said, "to a place where neither my father nor my enemies can find us." The safe house was nestled deep within the jagged, mist-shrouded peaks of Bukhansan, miles away from the neon-drenched high-rises and crowded alleyways of Seoul. It was a minimalist, fortress-like structure made of dark timber and reinforced glass, overlooking a sheer drop into a pine forest. Rain lashed against the massive windows, the rhythmic, heavy thumping of the storm providing the only soundtrack to the suffocating silence inside. Ji-hwan stood by the grand fireplace, his shirt changed into a simple black cashmere sweater that made him look less like a corporate titan and more like a predator at rest. He was staring into the flames, his hands tucked into his pockets, but his shoulders were tight, his posture radiating a restless, coiled energy. Zuri sat on the edge of the low leather sofa, a thick woolen blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She had washed the blood from her hands, but the phantom warmth of his skin still lingered in her palms. She watched him through the flickering amber light of the fire, trying to read the thoughts behind his granite profile. For 2 days, they had been isolated in this house. 2 days of stolen glances across the kitchen island, of long silences that carried more weight than any confession, and of an unspoken boundary that grew more agonizing with every passing hour. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't even come within 3 feet of her since they arrived, yet his presence filled every corner of the room. "You're doing it again," Zuri said softly, breaking the silence. Ji-hwan didn't turn around, but his head tilted slightly toward her voice. "Doing what?" "Watching me without looking at me," she said, leaning forward, the blanket slipping slightly from her shoulder to reveal the smooth, dark slope of her collarbone. "You stand there like a statue, but I can feel your eyes on me, Ji-hwan. If you want me gone, just say it. The moment the road's clear, I can take a flight out." Ji-hwan turned slowly, his face half illuminated by the firelight, his expression a mask of profound, restrained torment. "If I wanted you gone, Zuri, I would have put you on a private transport 24 hours ago. Do not mistake my distance for a lack of interest." "Then what is it?" she asked, rising to her feet, the blanket dropping to the floor as she walked toward him. She stopped just 2 feet away, refusing to let the vast difference in their heights intimidate her. "Because right now, it feels like you're punishing me for something I didn't do." "I'm punishing myself," Ji-hwan said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that vibrated in the small space between them. He took a single step forward, his shadow completely engulfing her. His hand lifted, his long fingers hovering just over the curve of her shoulder, desperately wanting to descend, to feel the velvet warmth of her skin, but his emotional restraint held him back like an iron chain. "Every second you are in this house, every time I hear your breath in the hallway, I am breaking a vow I made to myself when I took over the syndicate. I don't get to have things that matter, Zuri, because things that matter can be used to destroy me. I'm not a weapon to be used against you," she said, her voice dropping into a soft, dangerous whisper as she tilted her face up, her breath hitching as his scent, cedarwood and rain, washed over her. "No," Ji-hwan whispered, his eyes dark with an intense, possessive hunger that he could no longer completely hide. "You are far worse. You are a vulnerability. If my father knows you are alive, if he knows how I look at you." The phone on the heavy timber coffee table buzzed, its bright screen shattering the amber twilight of the room. Ji-hwan's eyes snapped to the device, the vulnerability instantly freezing back into ice. He picked it up, his face hardening as he read the encrypted text message. Zuri watched his expression drop into something cold, distant, and utterly terrifying. "What is it?" she asked, her heart sinking. Ji-hwan didn't look at her. He deleted the message, his fingers rigid. "My lieutenants found a security feed from the gallery from 3 weeks ago, before the attack. And you were in the main lobby, talking to a man," Ji-hwan said, his voice flat, completely devoid of the warmth that had been building just seconds prior. He turned his back to her, his posture stiffening into a wall of pure corporate detachment. "An American named Marcus. He arrived in Seoul on a diplomatic visa the same day your restoration contract started. My sources say he worked for the Federal Arts Asset Recovery Division, or more accurately, International intelligence. Zuri froze, her eyes widening. Marcus is my former colleague. He's the one who recommended me for this archival contract. Ji-Hwan, whatever you're thinking, it's not what it looks like. He was seen entering the safehouse district in Gangnam this morning, Ji-Hwan said, his tone dripping with a quiet, lethal jealousy that he was trying desperately to pass off as tactical suspicion. He turned his head slightly, his profile sharp against the dark window. He's looking for you. Or perhaps, he's looking for the ledger through you. Did you tell him where the Josian screen was kept, Zuri? Are you seriously accusing me of setting you up? Zuri's voice rose, a sharp sting of betrayal cutting through her chest. After I stayed? After I cleaned your blood off my hands? In my world, everyone has a price, Ji-Hwan said, his voice tight, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. He knew deep down she hadn't betrayed him. His intelligence team had already confirmed Marcus was operating independently. But looking at her, feeling himself slip closer and closer to an emotional precipice he couldn't survive, Ji-Hwan seized the misunderstanding like a shield. He needed her to be an enemy, because if she was an innocent woman who loved him, he would have to become a monster to save her from his family. Ji-Hwan, look at me and say that, Zuri demanded, her voice cracking with emotional pain, stepping into his line of sight. Ji-Hwan looked right past her, his eyes dead, his emotional control fully locked down. Rest well, Miss Charlotte. The guards outside will ensure you aren't disturbed. He walked out of the room, the heavy timber door clicking shut behind him with a sound that felt final, leaving Zuri alone in the flickering, dying light of the fire, the silence now a painful, echoing ache. The silence stayed between them for 3 grueling weeks, a heavy, suffocating wall that neither of them dared to break. Ji-Hwan had returned to the city, leaving Zuri under 24-hour guard at the mountain safehouse. He threw himself into the corporate warfare of the Josian Pa, his methods growing so brutal, so utterly unhinged, that even his father's oldest lieutenants began to whisper about his descent. He was cleaning house, eliminating every variable, tearing through rival factions in a desperate, silent race to secure the ledger before his father could use it as leverage to destroy Zuri. He didn't visit her. He didn't call. But every single night at precisely 3 a.m., his private security feed would show him sitting in the back of his black sedan park at the base of the mountain road, staring up at the single lit window of the cabin. He was a ghost haunting his own sanctuary. Inside the cabin, Zuri had stopped pacing. The initial anger had hardened into something far more dangerous, a quiet, unbreakable resilience. She had spent the weeks analyzing the digital photographs of the Josian screen she had saved on her local drive before the vault blew. She wasn't just a victim trapped in a mafia feud anymore. She was an expert who understood the history his family was trying to weaponize. When the front door finally opened on a rainy Tuesday evening, it wasn't Ji-Hwan who walked through. It was Chairman Kong. The old man moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his tailored traditional silk robes rustling against the hardwood floor. 2 massive, scarred enforcers stood behind him, their hands resting ominously inside their coats. He looked at Zuri with a cold, ancient curiosity, his eyes mapping her features with the clinical detachment of a collector examining a counterfeit vase. "You have caused a great deal of disruption in my household, Miss Charlotte," Chairman Kong said, his English flawless, carrying the soft, aristocratic cadence of old money and deep graves. "My son has spent 21 days destroying our shipping networks in the South just to keep your name out of our council meetings. He thinks he is being subtle. He thinks I do not know why he leaves his blood on the streets of Busan instead of returning to his bed." Zuri stood up from the dining table, her posture straight, her hands resting flat on the wood. She didn't bow. She didn't take a step back. "If your son is making mistakes, Chairman, that's between him and his conscience. I'm a contractor. Your foundation owes me an archival exit visa. An exit visa is for those who leave secrets behind," the chairman said, a small, terrifying smile touching his old lips. He raised his cane, tapping the floor once. "My son is weak because of you. He has forgotten that the Josian Pa does not compromise with outsiders. He has offered to surrender his succession rights to the southern docks in exchange for your safe passage back to America. A king, offering his crown for a woman he hasn't even touched. It is a shameful display. The words hit Zuri like a physical blow. Ji-hwan hadn't abandoned her. He had been buying her life, piece by piece, trading his own empire to keep her safe while letting her believe he hated her. The realization tore through her chest with a devastating, agonizing heat. "He's not weak," Zuri said, her voice dropping into a fierce, dangerous register that made the two enforcers shift their weight. "He's twice the man you are, because he actually knows the value of what he's protecting." "We shall see," the chairman murmured, turning back toward the door as the sound of a roaring engine echoed up the driveway. "He is here. Let us see if he can complete the transaction when the cost is written in your blood." Ji-hwan burst through the doors a second later, his hair drenched with rain, his black overcoat flying behind him like a shroud. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at the enforcers. His eyes slammed into Zuri, scanning her face, her hands, checking for any sign of violence. When he saw she was unharmed, a visible, trembling wave of relief passed over his sharp features, followed instantly by a cold, desperate terror. "Father," Ji-hwan said, his voice low, speaking in Korean before switching to English as he took a step between Zuri and the old man. "The papers for the southern docks are signed. The harbor master answers to your office now. Our agreement was clear. She leaves tonight." "The agreement has changed, Ji-hwan," Chairman Kong said, stepping onto the porch, his enforcers forming a wall behind him. "You have traded your power for her. But a man without power cannot enforce a contract. If you want her to live, you will prove to this family that she means nothing to you. You will be the one to escort her to the docks, and you will ensure she never speaks again." The old man walked out into the rain, leaving the heavy timber doors wide open. The cold mountain wind rushed into the room, scattering Zuri's research papers across the floor like dead leaves. Ji-hwan stood completely still for a long time, his back to her, his shoulders trembling slightly under his wet coat. When he finally turned around, the man who had looked at her with burning, hidden desire in the firelight was completely gone. In his place stood a stranger, a cold, empty shell of a mafia prince who had finally run out of options. "Pack your things," Ji-hwan said, his voice entirely flat, dead, and devoid of any humanity. "We're going to the harbor." "Ji-hwan, stop it," Zuri said, walking up to him, reaching out to grab his sleeve, but he pulled away violently, stepping back as if her touch was poison. "Do not touch me, Zuri," he snarled, his eyes flashing with a terrible, self-destructive fury. "You wanted your flight home? You're getting it. You were an amusement, a distraction from my duties. My father was right. I let a foreigner make me look foolish in front of my men. It's over. The contract is canceled." The words cut deeper than any blade, the intentional cruelty of his tone designed to break her spirit, so she would run and never look back. The separation was sudden, brutal, and inevitable, tearing away the fragile, beautiful thing that had been growing in the dark between them. The pain of this moment is heavy, a weight we all carry together as we watch these two guarded souls tear themselves apart. If you are feeling the depth of this sacrifice alongside us, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and join our circle. Your shared emotion keeps this story burning through the darkest nights.